Everybody, we are here with Dan Dombrowsky. He is the film composer for the comedy thriller The Estate, and that came out back in October 22nd from Vertical Entertainment. But I got to tell you, it's funny. It's about this spoiled kid and his stepmom who both hate their benefactor, the dad, and they meet a really cute dude who is like, cool, I can help you out with that. So it's very Housewives of Beverly Hills, and a little bit of nastiness thrown in it. Well, more nastiness. And yeah, anyway, Dan, you were the man that gave it the musical palette. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm well. Okay, full disclosure, I love talking to film composers and the people behind the scores for movies, because it is a thankless job that, if not done right, you'll notice it. And if it's done right, you should never notice it.
Yeah.
And I just think it's such an integral part of a cinematic experience. And I love shining light on talented people like you. So, yeah. So talk to me, how did you end up on this film, The Estate?
Well, it's a weird, long story, but when I first moved to Los Angeles, I left this corporate job in New York, a corporate music job at a record label. And I moved here and I was like, I'm going to be a composer. And I'd never really done it. And so I grew up in Miami, and there's a bunch of people from Miami that moved to LA. And so I started having a monthly dinner. I was like, hey guys, let's have a dude's dinner. And so we would just find a different Chinese restaurant every month. And one time, one of the guys invited another guy who coincidentally went to high school with my little brother, and that was James, the director of The Estate. And at one of these dinners, he said, hey, I'm working on this movie. And I said, tell me more. And I ended up going home and writing this, a couple pieces of music based on what he told me about the movie. And I sent it over. And that's how it happened. He wasn't expecting it. That's how I've gotten almost every job I've had, is just like, oh, hey, you got something? Let me write some music. And then I send it off. And this time someone liked it.
This one time.
No, and so it was great. And so I think I sent that over before they even started shooting.
Wow. And you hadn't read any of the script, or
nope.
you just knew basic concepts?
Like, I don't even remember what he told me. He's like, oh yeah, this dark comedy. And we liked they had just, because Chris, who stars in it, also wrote it. And he was like, oh yeah, we just watched the Apollo 11 documentary, we really like that direction. I was like, oh yeah. And so I sent them something that was like that and didn't get used in the movie at all, but it got me on the movie.
Well, see, there you go, it did something. How do you create the sound palette for a film? What's your first go-to inclination after hearing concept or reading a script?
I mean, I'm told I shouldn't be self-deprecating in these. So my stock answer in interviews, my stock answer is I usually just stare at my computer and cry for a bit.
Welcome to the creative world.
And then cry while I'm writing and cry after I get notes. It all depends. With this, the idea I had in mind, we didn't end up going with it. This idea, like what we went with, it's kind of weird because it is a dark comedy, and we play to the comedic and the campiness a fair amount. And that just happened through conversations and throwing stuff back and forth that we ended up on this sound. Other stuff, I mean, I'm working on another project with James that's a documentary, and I'm basing that kind of more on the subject of the documentary. And so it's kind of hard. I'm working on a TV show now about digital addiction, and it's in a lot of that is based on the stuff we use. Like, yeah, exactly.
Go ahead. No, okay.
No, but sounds from that world, So this one was more of a collaborative process between James, Chris, and I. But usually I'll sit there and I try to go with my first gut impressions of, of this. this idea feels like this, and then go with that. And sometimes it doesn't always work based on what you ultimately see. Because I wrote this without seeing anything, and the picture behind you is really what the movie looks like. And
Yeah,
so
it's hyper saturated. It's,
yeah,
you know, flashy.
And we had to come up with something that sounded like that looked. And so sometimes like I'll sit down like, this is gonna be the way it is, and then you see the footage and you're like, this doesn't sound like that looks, and you kind of have to work based on that.
Yeah,
I don't know if I answered your question, but
no, I mean, you did. It's so basically you come up with kind of your through line, and then once you see the visuals, you match the sound to the visuals. And
yeah, and this movie was weird because when I started, because the thing I sent over, actually we do hear a little bit of it in the scene where George's dad comes home and they're gonna kill him, and some of that was part of the original piece of music I wrote, and the rest of it, like, I mean, it's just this very synth kind of like thing. But then you watch the movie and there's like elements of old Hollywood scores and stuff like that. And so it's just, this was an odd duck in the sense that we just kind of like went everywhere with it. And it was fun. I mean,
it worked though. It totally worked. I would even say there were hints of Scarface when he came home.
Oh, I didn't even think about that, honestly. So, and from a filming aspect, because the staircase, I mean, they
the symmetrical.
Yeah. Well, we grew up in Miami, so I mean, yeah, there we go.
We said hello to your little friend. So, yeah. And what would you? I mean, how do you pick the particular instruments for your composition? Is it just you just throw everything out there and then kind of feel out what works, or did particular elements kind of jump out to you when you were throwing it together?
I think it was more of the first one, that we just kind of threw stuff out there to see what worked.
Right.
Well, in this one in particular, because everyone in it, there doesn't seem to be a good guy in this or a good girl in this.
No,
a good person.
Nobody's good in this film, which is why I loved it.
And everyone is like soulless, and there's this inhumanity. And so I really wanted to, and it became a struggle to make sure it stayed in there. But there's these vocal elements, like the ba ba, the like I wanted to make something sound rich, because it's all about this overt wealth, but also kind of soulless at the same time. So we landed on that, and I just it was kind of throwing stuff at it to see what worked, but we ultimately just choir had to be in there. The human voice had to be in there in some way. And you know, I know I'm getting a little tangential, but
no, it's fine. It's fine.
It's just kind of throwing stuff at the wall. But we knew that it had to have like this big, rich sound. And what sounds, I mean, nothing sounds like that more than like a big orchestra, you know? So we kind of had to do that, but also kind of take the humanity out of it at the same time.
Well, yeah, it's just, it had a really fun feel that was kind of kaleidoscopic all over the place. And so I was digging on that, and it's like,
awesome.
How did he come up with that one? So were there any moments where you and the director, like, you composed a piece of music and you thought, like you were saying before, oh, this is right on? I mean, how did you, and then it just doesn't work, or how did you present work to him?
With James in particular, I don't think anything like that happened. It was from the team overall that we had to come up with compromises for some stuff. But would it's hard because these movies are sprawling things, right? They're huge, right? And you've had 100 people working on it before it landed in your lap, and then you have to write, something that sounds somewhat cohesive. Somewhat, I guess I tried, over the course of 86 minutes, an hour and a half. And so I will try to get, the way I went about this was I wrote a piece of music, and I was like, how about this? Like, okay, that works there. And I'm like, okay, so, okay, you like this. And then how about this here? It's kind of based on this, but let's keep trying it. And so we kind of piecemealed it together. And it's you run into this Jenga type of situation where once you start getting the sign off and you have all this music, and if someone goes back like, hey, that part at the beginning, that every other piece of music is based on.
Take that.
I don't know if I like it. And you're like, oh, come on, you know? And so it's just, that's the way I found that I work best, is just like a piece at a time, and to fail as fast as possible, to just like throw ideas out there and find out what's working as early as possible. And then you kind of come up with, because this was the first time I worked with James, we come up with how we communicate with each other. And then there's just a lot of back and forth.
Awesome. Well, it definitely...
He lives down the street from my studio, so he would come by, and sometimes I would have to sit there and force him to sign off on stuff. I'm like, you have to say approved, you know, we have to do this, you know, because we're going to put this in front of an orchestra next week, you know, and that type of stuff.
This is deadline. Yeah. So very good. Well, it did come together, and I really enjoyed the work, like I said before. Are you a horror fan, a thriller fan? What kind of a composer are you? Are you just all over the place?
I'm kind of all over the place. I love writing for horror. I have a hard time watching horror because I get so scared. I'm not even kidding. Like, I
suppose that's the point, but still, it's fun.
I mean, look, I can't watch it. It's terrifying. But no, I will. I do write a lot of horror. Right now I'm working on 4 horror video games. Which, if you're an independent game guy, if you go on Steam or Epic Games, anything like that, I do Dark Deception, Monsters and Mortals, They Grow. Cool. I'm doing the new Evil Nun, Broken Mask that's coming out.
Yeah, we cover video games too. So, I mean, I'd be happy to talk to you about those. Connect me with those people. So
yeah, no, and these are like the somehow I've fallen into this horror world, even though I'm completely terrified of watching horror movies. So it's great. Don't tell anyone.
I suppose it's a little different being on the other end and kind of building it as opposed to having to experience it. But you know, it's oh well. All right. Well, listen, it was great talking to you, Dan. And I'm serious about the video game compositions. Just send me the info. I'd love to help you cover those as well, because we cover video games, books.
Awesome.
You don't compose for books, do you? So
that would be something.
Play this audio while you're listening. So anyway. Okay, cool. Well, listen, Dan, it was honestly a pleasure talking to you, and best of luck on this film, and best of luck on the next one that you're working with on the same director.
It's gonna be it's a documentary, and I've seen the first assembly. It's pretty fantastic.
Awesome. Well, hit us up, let us know what's going on. Awesome. And thank you so much for taking the time. You guys, The Estate is out right now from Vertical Entertainment, and it's really kind of fun. You need to check it out. Dan, a pleasure, sir.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Take care, buddy.
You too.